Welcome back to our channel, everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Eric. And today we're taking an in-depth look at interpreting gestures, with a special focus on understanding subtle nonverbal cues that communicate our feelings and intentions.
That's right, Eric. In this extended episode, we're exploring key vocabulary and expressions related to interpreting gestures, including make generalizations about something, anger, defensive, signal, display, fancy, and flirt with somebody.
We'll provide detailed explanations, numerous examples, and engaging dialogues so you can see how these words and phrases fit naturally into conversations about body language and gesture interpretation.
So sit back, relax, and join us as we decode the language of gestures and discover how these expressions shape our interactions.
Let's start with the phrase, make generalizations about something.
Make generalizations about something means to form broad conclusions or opinions based on limited observations or experiences.
In the context of gestures, people might be tempted to make generalizations about something like a person's mood or character solely based on one gesture.
For example, if someone frowns during a conversation, you might be inclined to make generalizations about them being angry or upset, even though there might be other reasons for the gesture.
A common example is, don't make generalizations about his personality just because he rarely smiles, as his reserved nature might simply reflect his mood or cultural background rather than a negative trait.
It's important to remember that while gestures can offer clues, they aren't always definitive. Always consider the context before jumping to conclusions.
In a dialogue, you might hear, I noticed she crossed her arms, and I made generalizations about her being uninterested. But then you realize, no, she was actually cold.
That's a perfect example showing that making generalizations about something without more evidence can lead to misunderstandings.
So, when interpreting gestures, try to avoid oversimplifying what you see. Look at the whole context before forming an opinion. Next, let's talk about anger.
Anger is a noun that describes a strong feeling of displeasure or hostility.
In body language, anger can be revealed through clenched fists, furrowed brows, and even aggressive gestures like pointing.
For instance, if you see someone with a reddened face, tight lips, and a tense posture, you might interpret that as a sign of anger.
An example in a conversation might be, when he slammed the door, I knew his anger was evident from his aggressive gestures.
Or consider, her rapid, sharp hand movements were a clear sign of anger, even though she didn't say a word.
It's also useful to note that anger can be expressed differently by different people. Some might show it with loud gestures, while others might simply have a stern, unyielding look.
And remember, anger isn't always overt. Sometimes it can be subtle. A slight tightening of the jaw or a brief flash of intense eye contact can be enough to signal that someone is feeling anger.
Understanding the physical cues of anger can help you better interpret the emotions behind a gesture. Now, let's explore the word defensive.
Defensive is an adjective that describes a state of being protective or resistant, often as a reaction to perceived criticism or threat.
In the realm of body language, someone who appears defensive might cross their arms, lean away, or exhibit tense facial expressions.
For example, if you notice someone with their arms crossed and a frown on their face during a discussion, you might interpret that as a defensive posture.
A typical example might be, when questioned about the mistake, he became defensive and started pointing fingers, which illustrates that his body language revealed his reluctance to accept criticism.
Another example is, her posture was very defensive. She kept her hands close to her chest as if protecting herself.
It's important to recognize that being defensive in your body language doesn't always mean you're at fault. It might just be a natural reaction to feeling threatened or judged.
Right, and when you see defensive gestures, it's a cue to approach the situation with sensitivity, ensuring that your words don't escalate the tension.
In a dialogue, you might hear, I noticed you were quite defensive during our meeting. Is there something bothering you?
That kind of observation can open up a discussion, rather than simply assuming negativity.
Next, we have the word signal.
Signal can be used as both a noun and a verb, meaning to send a message or indication through gestures or other nonverbal cues.
In terms of body language, a signal might be a nod, a wave, or even a subtle smile that communicates something without words.
For example, you might say, "He gave a small wave to signal that he was ready to leave," meaning his gesture conveyed a clear message.
Another example is, her furrowed brows and tight lips signal that she's upset, which shows that her facial expressions communicate her emotions.
Signals are crucial in communication because they often provide additional context to spoken words.
Imagine a situation where during a conversation, someone makes a dismissive gesture. You might say, that hand movement was a clear signal of his disapproval.
And sometimes a simple look can serve as a signal. For instance, a quick glance can signal that it's time to wrap up the meeting.
Signals can be intentional or unintentional, and interpreting them correctly is essential for understanding the true meaning behind a person's behavior.
Yes, recognizing these signals allows you to adjust your own communication to be more effective and empathetic.
Now, let's move on to the word display.
Display.
Display means to show or exhibit something openly. In body language, it refers to the visible expression of emotions or attitudes through gestures and facial expressions.
For example, you might say, "She displayed great enthusiasm through her wide smile and energetic gestures," which means her excitement was obvious to everyone.
Another example is, he displayed signs of nervousness by fidgeting and avoiding direct eye contact, highlighting how physical actions can reveal internal feelings.
In a discussion about fashion, one might also say, "The model displayed confidence on the runway," implying that her posture and movements communicated self-assurance.
Using display in conversation underscores that the way we act physically often communicates more than words alone.
And it's a useful term when you want to talk about how certain behaviors or emotions are evident.
For instance, you could say, the team's collective energy displayed their determination to win the game, demonstrating that their gestures and expressions conveyed a strong message.
It's all about being visible, making your feelings or intentions apparent to others through your actions.
Next, let's discuss the word fancy.
Fancy.
Fancy is an adjective that describes something elaborate, stylish, or sophisticated. In the context of body language and appearance, it can refer to someone's polished and attractive style.
For example, you might say, "She wore a fancy dress that perfectly complemented her elegant gestures," indicating that her outfit and demeanor were refined.
Another example could be, his fancy watch caught everyone's eye at the meeting, meaning that the accessory was eye-catching and stylish.
Fancy can also be used as a verb in informal context to express liking or attraction, such as, "I really fancy that new colleague," meaning you find them attractive or interesting.
In terms of gestures, you might comment, the way he fancied himself, with a slight nod and a smile, suggested he was confident and approachable.
It's a versatile word that can both describe an object or style, and also express personal preference or attraction.
Consider this dialogue. "Lisa, did you see that fancy suit he was wearing? It really drew attention."
Yes, it's the kind of outfit that makes you fancy him even more.
This playful use of fancy shows how language can capture both the style and the personal reaction to it. Finally, let's discuss the phrase flirt with somebody.
Flirt with somebody.
Flirt with somebody means to behave in a playful or romantic way towards someone, often with the intention of showing interest.
For example, you might say, "At the party, he couldn't help but flirt with somebody attractive near the bar," which shows that his gestures and comments were intended to signal his interest.
Another instance might be, she was known to flirt with somebody by giving subtle smiles and gentle touches during conversation, highlighting the nonverbal cues that accompany flirting.
This phrase is often accompanied by specific gestures like prolonged eye contact, playful winks, or a light touch on the arm, each a form of nonverbal communication indicating interest.
In another example, you could say, even a casual flirt with somebody can brighten someone's day if done respectfully, indicating that flirting is a way to express admiration without any serious intent.
And in a more nuanced discussion, someone might remark, while he tends to flirt with somebody frequently, he's always charming and respectful, which shows that flirting can be lighthearted and positive.
It's important to understand that flirting involves both verbal and nonverbal cues, and interpreting these signals requires sensitivity and context.
Exactly. Gestures like a playful smile, a slight tilt of the head, or even a teasing comment can all be ways to flirt with somebody.
And remember, the intention behind flirting is to express interest, so it should always be mutual and respectful.
Now that we've covered all the key terms, let's discuss how they can be applied together in the context of interpreting body language.
Let's imagine a scenario where you're at a social event, a networking party, or a casual gathering, and you start to observe the body language of those around you.
Right, Eric? The first thing you might do is observe how people are interacting, noticing their gestures, facial expressions, and overall posture.
For instance, if someone seems to jump to conclusions about a situation, they might quickly make generalizations about something without seeking more details.
Exactly. In such cases, you might see someone furrowing their brow or crossing their arms, which can be interpreted as signs of anger or defensiveness.
And if you notice a person using open hand gestures and maintaining good eye contact, it often signals confidence and friendliness.
On the other hand, if a person is constantly flirting with somebody by giving playful winks or lightly touching their arm, that can be a clear indication of their interest.
True. It's important to note that body language is rarely black and white. For example, someone might appear defensive not because they are angry, but because they are simply uncomfortable in a social situation.
And when you see someone flirt with somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean they are serious about a relationship. It might just be a fun, casual interaction.
That's why it's so critical to interpret gestures in context. You might be tempted to make generalizations about something based solely on a single gesture, but it's important to look at the whole picture.
Let's take a real-life scenario. Imagine you're at a work event and you notice a colleague who seems a bit withdrawn. You might observe that they're avoiding eye contact and their posture is slumped.
At first, you might jump to conclusions and assume they're upset or angry, but upon closer observation, you might notice they're simply tired.
Exactly. It's crucial not to make generalizations about something without considering the full context.
In another scenario, think about someone who's very outgoing. Their lively gestures and frequent smiles might signal that they are comfortable and happy.
But if that same person starts to flirt with somebody in a subtle, playful manner, maybe by giving a knowing smile or a light touch, it adds another layer to their body language.
And that's where understanding collocations like flirt with somebody becomes important. It allows you to interpret their actions more accurately.
Let's dive into another example. Imagine you're in a conversation and your friend starts flirting with somebody by laughing and touching their hair.
You might observe that their gestures are deliberate and charming, which draws attention to their playful nature.
At the same time, if another person in the group tends to make generalizations about something without really listening, it can create tension.
For example, if someone sees a slight frown and immediately assumes it's anger, they might misinterpret the situation entirely.
That's why it's essential to slow down, observe carefully, and interpret the full range of nonverbal cues before forming an opinion.
Now, let's discuss how cultural differences play a role. In some cultures, maintaining steady eye contact is a sign of respect, while in others, it can be seen as confrontational.
Similarly, the way people flirt with somebody varies greatly. In some countries, gentle gestures and reserved smiles are the norm, while in others, more overt actions like playful touches are common.
And this is why understanding terms like not necessarily is so valuable. It reminds us that a particular gesture or expression does not always mean the same thing in every context.
Although we didn't focus on not necessarily as one of today's key terms, it's an important concept when interpreting body language. It teaches us that appearances can be deceiving, and the same gesture might not necessarily indicate the same emotion or intent across different situations.
Let's further explore gesture. A simple nod or wave can signal agreement or recognition, while a dismissive wave can signal disinterest.
And when someone displays a series of deliberate gestures, it can be a clear sign of their emotional state, whether they are excited, nervous, or even trying to conceal their true feelings.
But today, we're focusing on how to interpret these gestures accurately. For example, if a person is flirting with somebody and also giving warm eye contact and gentle gestures, you can reasonably conclude that they are expressing interest in a lighthearted, social manner.
In contrast, if someone is very defensive in their posture, crossing their arms tightly, avoiding eye contact, or fidgeting, they might be trying to protect themselves from perceived criticism.
And that's where you need to be cautious. It's easy to make generalizations about something based on a single gesture, but by taking the time to observe multiple cues, you can gain a more accurate understanding.
Let's consider an office scenario. Imagine you're in a meeting and you notice a coworker who seems quiet and reserved. You might interpret their lack of engagement as disinterest.
However, if you observe that they are actually taking notes and occasionally nodding, it might indicate they are deeply processing the information, even if they aren't speaking up.
That's a great reminder. Always consider the full context and avoid jumping to conclusions.
Another key point is the importance of being aware of your own gestures. For example, if you're trying to signal openness during a conversation, you might consciously maintain good eye contact and use open hand gestures.
Absolutely. In fact, if you want to flirt with somebody in a friendly, professional setting, you might smile gently and tilt your head slightly. Small, subtle gestures that convey warmth and interest without being too forward.
And when you want to draw attention to something positive, like a well-coordinated outfit or a clever idea, you can use your body language to display your enthusiasm.
For instance, you might lean forward slightly when listening to someone, showing that you're engaged and interested in what they're saying.
This extended discussion on interpreting gestures shows us that every movement and facial expression carries meaning, if we take the time to understand them.
Remember, the key is to be observant, to interpret carefully, and to avoid making generalizations about something without enough evidence.
Whether you're analyzing someone's gesture in a social setting or noting the signal in a professional interaction, the more details you gather, the more accurate your understanding will be.
And always keep in mind that cultural differences, personal habits, and context play a significant role in how gestures are expressed and understood.
So, as you practice your English and improve your communication skills, challenge yourself to pay closer attention to these subtle cues.
Try watching videos or observing people in real life, and then discuss what you observe with a friend, maybe even talk about how someone might flirt with somebody or use a particular gesture to signal their mood.
By expanding your vocabulary and honing your observational skills, you'll not only improve your language, but also your interpersonal interactions.
And that's the beauty of language. It's not just about words. It's about understanding the world around you and communicating effectively.
We hope that this deep dive into interpreting gestures and body language has given you practical tools and insights that you can apply in both your personal and professional life.
Whether it's learning to avoid making generalizations about something too quickly or understanding when someone is flirting with somebody, every piece of information adds to your ability to communicate more clearly.
Thank you for joining us on this extended exploration of body language. We believe that these insights will help you become a better communicator by reading nonverbal cues more accurately.
Practice these techniques, observe carefully, and don't be afraid to ask questions when something isn't clear.
As always, we appreciate your time and attention. Keep learning, keep exploring, and let your curiosity guide you in understanding the language of gestures.
Until next time, stay observant, stay open-minded, and remember, effective communication is as much about what you observe as it is about what you say.
Bye for now, everyone.
See you in our next episode. Happy learning and happy observing.